Welcome to Kinwise Conversations in AI. Today we have Scott Kern. Scott isn't a tech evangelist who started his career in Silicon Valley. He's a historian who was on the fast track to a PhD until he realized he missed the messy, vital work of human connection. He pivoted to the classroom to find meaning, and now, as an AP US history teacher at North Star Academy, he finds himself using artificial intelligence to protect that very connection. Today, we're diving into the tension between cognitive offloading, the fear that students are letting bots do the thinking, and the incredible potential for personalized coaching. Scott shares how he built a system that didn't just automate grading, but actually cloned his feedback voice, leading to a 22% increase in his students' AP exam pass rates. Scott, thank you so much for being here. I am really excited to hear about your experiences teaching and supporting students in the age of AI. I really want to just hear about your story and understand like what brought you to education, but then also what made you interested in artificial intelligence and how did you come to this place where you're speaking and doing some really important thought leadership and work around that?
Yeah, so the education part is a longer story that I'll try to make short, but it kind of starts in middle school. I was in the orchestra and I played violin when I was in elementary school, and I kind of topped out on where that was going. And so, as a ninth grader, my guidance counselor said, "Okay, well, if you're not going to do that, what else are you going to do?" Took a world history course. And the teacher in that course really changed my life. And it started this long love of history, taking as many history classes as I could, majoring in history in college. And I think I knew at that point that I wanted to do something with history, and I was on track to get a PhD in history. But then I pivoted after my master's because it felt like the work I was doing was interesting, but not like meaningful in a deeper sense. So when I thought
Mhm.
about what had brought me to that point, it was my teachers. It was the people who had made a big difference in my life, you know? So I pivoted. I went to education school. I started teaching middle school history in Newark, New Jersey at North Star Academy. And then partway through, I moved up to high school and I've been teaching high school ever since. And I can't really imagine doing anything else, but who knows what the future holds. In terms of where AI entered the picture, like about 2 years ago, I can't say that I was super interested in AI or keeping up with everything, but a colleague had taken a class offered by PlayLab, which you may know, which
Mhm.
offers basically to help teachers build custom tools that they can use with students that have really tight sort of guardrails on them. And they said, "This is super interesting. You should try it." So I tried it, and within like 5 minutes of that first session, we were off. We were just like building a bot, and I was like, "This is incredible." And it just started taking over more and more of my mental space. And of course, as a teacher, the natural thing I was thinking is like, where can this enter the picture to really support student learning? And it's just kind of flown from there ever since, trying a little bit here or there, and then diving further in as I've gotten more comfortable, and students are getting more comfortable with the tools too.
That's really cool. And when you were talking about majoring in history, I feel like people who understand history sometimes see patterns, or
Mhm.
I'm curious, like where the way you view AI right now, do you see connections in history, or are there things about history that you think about in terms of artificial intelligence and the way that's really changed in the last few years to become more accessible?
Yes and no. I mean, the thing that makes this incredibly unique is just like the pace of change, which I think we're
Hmm.
all feeling and is like giving us all so much anxiety about what's happening, is that it's happening so fast. Like every day, every week, every month, there's a new tool, there's a new model, there's new standards that states and schools are releasing new policies. And so that I think is fairly unprecedented. I can't think of anything else that has moved that quickly. But there are certainly echoes. Like when you think of these, like sometimes when I'm working with teachers about AI, we'll sort of show this like sort of long upward pointing graph that shows like major pivot points in human history, from the printing press to all the way to like the internet. And everything is exponential. And we're kind of up in the top right of
Yeah.
that. It is another sort of pivot point, I think, in human history, but it's at this rapid acceleration point. So I see echoes in the past, but I have no idea what the future holds. Anyone you talk to that has a lot of expertise about AI is not willing to predict what the future holds because they don't know. And I think I'm right there with them, especially when it comes to education. I'm just not sure where we're headed with this or how schools might be shaped by it in the coming years. We have started, like, we're about to pilot an AI literacy program at my school. And so that's really like pushing for how we think we can prepare kids for
Mhm.
whatever the future holds. But in terms of specifics, I don't know. I mean, I see echoes in the past, but I'm not sure where we're headed in the future.
It's very difficult to predict the future,
Yeah.
but it is interesting to think about the perspective you bring of looking at the past with students and how that can help you think critically about the future. I know it was so cool to hear your story about how you had a teacher who kind of inspired you and that brought you back to this place of meaning for your students. And as you now are teaching and there's this new tool that you have at the table, you've talked about how you see that can be helpful for teachers and helpful for students. Do you see ways that artificial intelligence has helped you to connect more deeply with your students or further that connection, as that seems to be a really important driver for you as an educator?
Yeah, I wouldn't say tools have necessarily deepened connection.
Uh-huh.
But what it has done is it's like allowed me to be a better version of the teacher that I want to be in many ways, especially with how I've used the tools in helping students support their writing and their writing feedback. And so, in the sense that like being a good teacher connects you to students and creates like stronger connection in class, yes. But at the same time, the great worry here is that these tools are going to distance humans from each other and distance people from each other in the class. And so the twin things that are always in my head of like use tools to support students in every way we can, but teach them about how this can undermine their learning at the same time and undermine human connection because that would be the last thing that we would want to happen in classrooms. And I think that tension between those two things, that's what teachers are trying to deal with right now. And everyone's dealing with it in different ways. I feel fortunate to have found some early success, and I'm just hoping to kind of keep moving that forward.
Could you give us some examples of that early success and what's worked for you?
Yeah, so I teach AP US history is like my primary course that I
Uh-huh.
teach. When going like back to when I first started using those AI tools, my immediate thought was again to writing. I think this can really help students improve their writing faster. I think it can help give them really precise feedback. And so the way I've explained it to sort of other educators is that normally when we would have students produce something and then look at their work and then figure out what to do next, we would be forced to kind of pick a gap, like a gap that fits the most number of students
Mhm.
possible, but knowing that there are students that fall on either side of that gap, that where there's the high flying student who's they are ready to write about complexity and use nuance in their essay. But there's also the struggling writer who can't yet form clear, coherent arguments. But the middle part, the one that we, kind of have to do the best fit teaching gap to, is not addressing either of those things. So you would do a reteach, like go through the steps, teach students how to fit that best gap, and then once students are working, try to support students on either side. With AI tools, I think the difference is that now everyone is in that middle part. Like every student is getting feedback from the AI tool that's specifically on their part of the essay that they need to work on. And so it doesn't feel anymore like students are falling outside the mean that I'm trying to hit. Everyone's there. And at the same time, I'm still circulating in class, still responding to feedback, and I can give more support to students who are struggling. It was almost like I was cloning myself in a way and dropping myself all around class in a way that could give them feedback in my voice without me being there, but knowing that I'm still going to get to that student a couple of times physically in the class, but they're also going to get 5 or 6 touch points with a bot who's giving similar feedback. And the last year I had my strongest AP results. The data team at Uncommon Schools analyzed this, and their determination was that they think that AI tools led to a 22% increase in students passing the AP exam. Maybe this is something that we need to think about how we can spread it to other classrooms and get other teachers using this too. That's what's been so exciting. The writing feedback is the main thing that's hit for AP US history, but then from there, it started to snowball into other ways where we think it can enter the picture to support student, and a lot of it's student thinking.
Hmm.
If students are having a discussion in class, like during discussion time, absolutely no tech, no AI, that's shut, that's away, can't have it. But leading up to it, after working with a peer, sparring with an idea that they could then bring to the seminar, or on the back end of that, after students come away with ideas and their thinking has been pushed by other students, reflecting on that and then sparring again with an AI is an interesting way to get kids thinking more critically on either end without like sacrificing the human connection, the human conversation in the middle.
That's really cool. I feel like there's almost like a system or a structure that you're talking about is like when we do this, we don't have this or discussion, no tech. We're going to have this specific bot that we're going to use for feedback. And so, is the bot you used for feedback something that you built with PlayLab?
So I built a similar bot in Magic School, but just to sort of talk through what's under the hood there
Yeah, I
is
would love that.
I graded student essays just as I normally would, and I scored them. And then I built a bot that has their scores. It has all of their essays in it, has access to them. It has the original task, it has the rubric, and it has exemplary responses. So the way the bot worked in class is a student would type in their name, it would pull up their rubric score, then it would identify where students weren't meeting the bar, and it would give them the steps for how to get that point in that part of the essay, and then it would pull up that part of their essay so that they could revise it. Then, as they're revising, they get feedback on that. And once the bot has scored it and they've met the criteria, it would move them to the next part of the rubric. So that's how every student is getting exactly what they need. But also on the front end, how I've still read all of their writing, I still scored everything. But now the bot comes in and helps them level it up and make it stronger. That was a custom tool that's very hyper specific to each class that I've been continuing to iterate on and use for other tasks as well.
That's really cool because you did the work on the front end. You still knew how your students wrote. You still had a sense of you kept yourself in the loop and didn't totally outsource. But I think sometimes grading, you can get an assignment that's been graded that has some feedback on it, but not actually do anything with that feedback. The purpose of the bot wasn't to grade the students' work, it was to coach them on how to improve their work based on the grades that you had given.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's almost like they had a personalized writing coach that was built on my reading of their work and scoring of their work. And so that to me made sense for I would feel comfortable using this with students because I knew it was sort of aligned to everything we had done in class and the things that I had seen in their work.
And so you're still using that same process with that bot. You'll read, grade, input, and then students are able to get that individualized feedback.
Yeah, always iterating on the process to some extent, but yeah, the general process is the same. And the same goes for like the sort of pre-discussion sparring, post-discussion sparring, those sorts of things. I'm just constantly updating them with new tasks, new assignments, new documents so that it's like specific to what we're working on at any given day.
That's really cool. I think it's a good example too. You do put in a lot of work. You're not outsourcing your thinking to AI. You're very involved, but it allows students to get the best of what you have to offer when there's only one of you.
Yeah, which is like that's the great sadness we face as teachers is there is just one of us and there's 25 or 30 or more students in our classroom and they all need us in every moment, but we can't be there in every moment. This is to me like was helping me be more present than I could ever be before.
Yeah, I used to work at KIP and there was this, we had a push for every student to have some amount of one-on-one time with a teacher
Mm.
each week because of the improvement they make on students when they have some small group time or some one-on-one time with a teacher. But when you look at the numbers of actual minutes that you were able to spend with a student, it's low when you have that many students in a classroom. I taught middle school, so I had lots of students rotating all day long. On paper, it sounds really good, but in actuality, the most you're giving students is just this tiny little sliver of individualized attention. And so you've really figured out how to use AI to kind of replicate yourself, and it has this exponential impact. And yeah, it's cool to think
Yeah.
about.
And the students have taken to it and they are getting more comfortable with it. And then I think this is all just sort of funneling into this broader AI literacy push that we're thinking about too.
I want to talk more about the AI literacy push, but I'm curious when you use these bots, do you look back and see the responses that are given after the fact? What's your quality control look like? I know you do a lot on the front.
Yeah. Looking at all of every single line of every single student is impossible. Looking at everything is never possible. But you can look at student logs, and other teachers and other leaders have looked at this too, because we're all just sort of fascinated by, what does this mean? How is this working? And what we found is like there are some general frustrations that students have, which is really funny. And that's that they're like, no, I did that, but move me on to the next step. I've met the point. And so to address that part, which I was seeing, we came up with the golden rule, which is that if what the bot is telling you doesn't seem right, check in with your partner and check in with me because you're right. You're the one who has like the agency in whether or not you move forward and whether or not this makes sense to you. And like 99% of the time, students are right. They're like, no, the bot's wrong. It's the feedback doesn't make sense. And that doesn't happen a ton, but just giving them that rule like helped push through and limit those frustrations that students were having. The big question everyone wants to know is like, were students just copying and pasting what the bot said? And the answer is no, they weren't, which was really interesting. Students were engaging with the bot. They wanted to go through the process by themselves. And I think the reason why is because students aren't getting scored just on the product. Rather, the students are being scored on the number of revisions they're making. And so
Mhm.
for students, then it's about iterating and interacting with the bot and making lots of revisions and getting lots of touch points and forcing themselves to think about the steps in the writing and the questions that they should ask moving forward and not about can it just give me a better version that I can copy and paste into the Google Doc. So that for me like helped push me past one of the big worries that I think we're all feeling in education right now is like the hip phrase is cognitive offloading, but like eliminating productive struggle, where kids don't have to struggle through something and they just get it, and that's hugely detrimental to their thinking. So this for me eliminated that because we were focused on process rather than product. And that kind of mindset is definitely informing me moving forward about the tools that's central to how these can potentially work well for teachers and for students.
You're able to engage in almost students may even be, pushing back or arguing with a bot about the
Yeah,
feedback that they're getting, and that's highly engaging. And so that is a different approach. It'd probably be actually very boring to just copy paste what a bot tells you all day long. And so I think the setup in the structure on the front end seems to lead to a productive use on the back end.
100%. In addition to the preparation, it's also I've read all of your essays. I scored them all. This tool that we're going to use, it, I think is going to help us get better. And now, having used it last year, I can tell students with confidence. And last year, it helped us score better on the AP exam. So we're going to use it again today. And that has gone a long way in convincing students that this is something that they should try and that, they're excited about using to help in their own writing.
That's really compelling framing. I want to ask you about the AI literacy that is happening at your school. Is the it's an AI literacy course, right? Is
Mhm.
that kind of built out of the work that came out of your class? This is the story I have in my head, so tell me if it's wrong. You
Okay.
you use this bot in your classroom. You see like great results with your students on the AP exam. Your data team is like, what's happening is attributing to this increase. Let's have some more AI literacy in our school. Is that what happened, or was it something different?
Sort of. I think it's me and some other colleagues just increasingly feeling, as many teachers are, that the world is really changing and we're worried about what it might mean for students, particularly when they graduate, whether they go to college or not, but just as they enter a world that's increasingly steeped in AI things that are very obvious in some ways and not so
Mhm.
much in others. And I think a lot of what I see and read out there is students need to be able to know how to prompt and use tools. And I think that's true. And I think of that more as like AI fluency, how to use a tool effectively. But what we're trying to do is think about the roots of what it means to educate people, which is to like sort of go inward and think inward about what matters to you, and then look outward at the world. And then the sort of like the space between those two things
Mm.
where education comes in. And so we're trying to figure out how does AI enter the space between the inward and the outward. The AI literacy pilot that we're doing later this month is the first week is analog. There's no technology, there's no AI tools at all. It's just about thinking about purpose and then thinking outward about a person or a problem that they know that somebody else is struggling with that they could help with. And then
Mm.
in between is going to be where the AI literacy comes in. And we're framing this as an AI driver's license for students. So I mean, driver's license is just an exciting thing, to get when you're a teenager and kind of a rite of passage in many ways. But also because we think that like cars is a pretty good metaphor for AI. It's a new technology that's kind of hard to understand, exciting, dangerous in a lot of ways, bad for the environment, but it's something that you kind of need in a lot of ways to get by in day-to-day life.
Mm.
And so if we think of AI in that sense, then it's about like empowering students, then sticking with the car metaphor, to be drivers rather than passengers. Problems that they can solve in their life, ways that they think about the world themselves, and eventually about AI too, and the companies that make it and how it's used. And then where AI could enter the process to help, how it could enter and undermine the process, and then where you might not want it at all. Where going old school with no technology is actually the best way to solve your problem or to connect with people. And so over the course of the next semester, students are going to take this, and then at the end, they're going to present on what their initial problem was, how AI entered, what its limits were, and then really importantly, like what is their personal ethos about AI in the world.
Mm.
So then they're going out into the world and the tools are going to change. Like to our point earlier about the future, who knows? Are we even going to be typing into chat boxes in 8 years and that's how we interact with AI? I have no idea. But if students know not just how to prompt, but like how to think about AI and how it exists in the world and in their lives, then it kind of doesn't matter what the tools are because they're going to have a framework to meet whatever is coming their way, and they're going to feel like they have agency in whatever new thing happens with AI.
That's exciting. It's like when you have a perspective on how you view something, then you're able to move more intentionally rather than, I think a lot of times we encounter new technology or new things, and it just kind of is something that feels like it happens to you and you're just in the river of it. Giving students time and space to develop their idea and perspective, I think can be really powerful. How did you choose which are all students in your school taking this AI literacy course, or is it a select few? How did you choose?
So for this first pilot, students are going to self-select. They have like a project period twice a week where, and it's just going to be seniors since this is most immediately relevant to them as they're going to be graduating at
That
the
makes
end of the
sense.
year. So we're just going to have about 20 seniors in this pilot program that will end up being about 30 or 35 lessons. But the hope is that every senior will get sort of a condensed version of this of like 3 to 5 lessons to at least give them like a framework for thinking about AI and themselves and the world. But those students are going to self-select. So they get to choose what project they're in, everything from like glass making to podcasting to now AI literacy. So we're going to see what 20 students sign up, and I'm really excited that it could be anyone, but that, we're going to move forward with them and really explore how this impacts their futures and how they're thinking about AI.
It'll be fun to see at the end of this what reflections students have and what they produce. I think it's great that your school has some structures already in place where you can fit an AI literacy course into this process. It's really exciting.
And the challenging part is figuring out, like, if we're going to scale this across more schools, where do they fit it in? And that's something we're thinking through. I think there are versions of it that could work like in advisory or with the seniors after they work with their college counselors and the acceptances have come in or not in financial aid packages. There's usually a little chunk of time there at the end of the year, which could be a good place. But in this case, I think we have to figure it out just to give students the mindset to prepare for the future that I think is going to be just very rapidly changing.
Absolutely. I think schedules are hard in schools and you have to make trade-offs to fit new things in, but this is a trade-off that I believe is worth making as we see what a big impact this is having. The choices that students are going to have to be making once they go out into college and the workforce. I remember this summer I did a PD for teachers entering the workforce on just some beginning strategies to use AI to prepare for the first week. It was a very short PD, but I had one of the new teachers, they're just coming out of undergrad, said it's so hard to move from an undergrad where everyone's saying, don't use this technology, using it is cheating, this is bad, to being asked to think about how to use this technology in my work as an educator. I think that the transition from the academic world to the workforce is even if you're transitioning to an academic setting, it's a big transition anyway for students who haven't had a chance to think about their own perspective and have just been told this is what it is. It can be really hard when you're faced with a different idea once you go into the workforce or your university.
Yeah, 100%. And that I think that's why teachers need to be thinking about this too. In the same sense that like students need to think about AI and the world, teachers need to be thinking about that too. There are plenty of teachers out there who say like it's never going to enter my classroom. I'm not here to tell them that they're wrong, but I think teachers who come to that conclusion, if they've done so because they've reflected on what the tools mean and how it enters their classroom, their own personal values, and that's where they've landed. That makes sense. But people who are just rejecting it or people who are jumping in wholesale, I think risk not setting students up for success because then they haven't done the deep thinking about AI and what it means that then we're asking students to do also to prepare for the world that's coming.
Yeah, it's so important to take time to grapple and think and develop your own perspective. You are obviously someone who's been a leader around AI in your school as you've used this technology with your students and as you're a part of this AI literacy course in a big way. What has that been like as you've talked with other teachers at your school? What are conversations like? Do you see teachers who are very skeptical of the technologies, teachers who are all in? What is that like?
It's the whole range. It's everything you just said. There are teachers who are all in and use it a lot in their personal lives, and then there are teachers who don't use it at all and are incredibly skeptical. I think part of the work I've been doing is training teachers at my school and other schools in our network about AI. One thing that has seemed to resonate across everyone is when we frame this as students are, and you're not sure about it. Well, imagine that you're 18. You're a senior and you're about to enter the world. How are they going to be prepared for this if we don't figure this out first? And the people they trust most in the world, their teachers, educators, if they're not the ones teaching them, then what's going to happen? Are
Mm,
we really setting them up for success in life if we haven't done that work? And I think even the most skeptical of people have been really won over by that thinking and that framing and that argument. And then from there, it's again, it's less about like how do you use specific tools, because there are all sorts of tools you can use to become a more efficient teacher, but more like, what are the values that we have as a school around AI use? How do we get students to be thinking about that also? And then what is it that we want seniors to think about AI or have thought about by the time that they graduate? And once we sort of frame it in that way, teachers are like feeling how they're a part of the process and how important it is. And that seems to resonate a lot. You don't have to use the tools in your classroom, but you've got to think about this because students are going to be grappling with it.
Yeah, these are really big questions. I think social media had such a big impact on the way we communicate and interact. It had a huge impact on students. And I think that was an area where, at least the schools I was a part of, but I think education in general, there weren't enough conversations about what this means. And students were using them. I was using social media before I thought about what the ramifications of that are. And I think whenever we have a new technology, it's just so important to think about, what does this mean? How do we want to use it? How do we not want to use it? What are the ramifications of that? It's so easy to be excited about possibility, but things can be really positive and have complicated, problematic aspects that we need to think through and grapple with.
And like you said with social media, I think all of us probably didn't do enough thinking. And hopefully that's part of what informs like this new AI rush that's happening to everyone.
Absolutely. Are there tools? I know like any tool could be a good tool, but I'm curious from your perspective because you have had some early wins and some success, particularly like in student results. I think, we can use AI tools all day, but if they don't have an impact on students' learning or students' interactions with each other in a positive way, then what's the point? Do you have tools that you found work really well, things that have been challenging to use? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, my work is curriculum writing, and tools are really great for that, especially as an efficiency piece. If you can create tools that have templates and documents that you're regularly working from, the curriculum documents released from the College Board or rubrics from the College Board. It just makes it so much easier to create things that are aligned to those external documents that, you need to use. Any LLM language model from GPT to Gemini to Claude are all quite good at that. In terms of in school, like the custom bots, I really like because they put such clear guardrails on what students are doing with them. Like it's really just about that one task. But at the same time, especially as I'm thinking about AI literacy and what tools we're going to be using there, we need to open things up so that students know what's out there and can see sort of the boundaries of what's helpful and what's not. So in the classroom, I think it really depends on what you're doing. I have a friend who does connected learning. And an example that he uses that's a totally different context than mine, but super interesting, is he had some students who wanted to be pilots and set up GPT voice mode and had them be air traffic controllers. And so to guide these two students who sort of like went over in the corner of the classroom and said, okay, they're going to talk you into landing the plane now. And they were kind of doing their thing. And then he went over later to check in on them. Totally different tool because it's a totally different context. So because my class is like a little bit more traditional, being an AP class and being a history class, those like clear rubric aligned bots seem to be kind of where I headed. But over as time goes on, also I'm sort of breaking out of that. Like I'm playing around now with a bot that will allow students to ask a panel of historical figures questions. So, for example, if we have a unit on the early United States and the struggle to balance liberty and order in young America, students are going to generate questions that they could ask to John Adams and George Washington and Hamilton, who are all on a panel. And then they'll ask a question, and then the panelists in the chatbot will respond, but also respond to each other. And so I think that has some interesting implications because then we can stop it and close the AI and turn it off and then discuss what do we think of their responses? Did we think what they said made sense given what we know about these historical figures and this time period? So it's hard for me to even say what new tools I will be using. Tools sort of meets the context, and I can see like so many different tools being successful for different teachers in different places.
It's kind of having some understanding of what's out there and then figuring out what are your constraints. If you're preparing for an AP class as an AP exam that's very specific. And so you really want to prepare students to do well at that at the end, which may look different from what success looks like. A career connected learning classroom where you're exploring things in a different way. Not to say that the assessment is the only thing, but just thinking about that element of success and how you prepare students for that, depending on the tool that you use.
Hmm.
Well, I always end my conversations with one question. And it's about like when you think about AI, what is sparking hope for you when you think about what's possible? What makes you feel really hopeful? And then what are you concerned about? What keeps you up at night? What are you worried about when you think about this new technology?
Yeah. Well, how long do you have? Because the worries are just like,
No, you
huge.
jam on me, Scott.
They're huge and mounting. The number one worry that I have is that we don't do anything as educators and that students graduate and all of these tools that are built by very powerful companies are just like a sort of assaulting them and they have no framework for thinking about them. That's my big worry is that students enter an AI world unprepared to think about how AI is impacting them and how to use it.
What do you
My
think are the
hope,
con though?
go ahead. I want to hear
What are the consequences of that?
I think it's possible that that could further widen inequity gaps that exist right now. I think it could further entrench power where it exists right now.
Mm.
And I think that it could mean that students are unprepared for the paths forward that they think they want or that they think they're prepared for because AI has changed things so fundamentally that they're unable to adjust to it or unable to react in a meaningful way
Mm.
to it.
Yeah. What about your hope?
Hope. I would love to end on hope. Hope
What
is
gives you
that
hope?
what gives me hope is working with students every day. They are hungry for meaning, for things that are interesting. They're hungry to be challenged. And so I think on a deep level, when we tell students that the quick way to do things with AI is often going to be less interesting and is going to undermine you and your future, that resonates and that kids respond to that well and that they want to do well and they want to succeed. And it also gives me hope that even the people I disagree with in education who are passionate about AI and the future are thinking about it and are trying to figure out how to move forward. And I think that's exactly where we need to be. We need like more teachers getting out there, saying their piece, thinking about AI and thinking about how it fits or it doesn't in schools. Because if outside actors drive forward how AI unfolds in schools, kids will be the worse off for it.
It's like you need people who understand education, understand students, understand why they're there to be the decision makers because the world outside of schools, the corporate world, the people who are building these tools, if they don't have understanding of education, you don't know what kind of tools we're going to end up with, and they may not actually be helpful for our students.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Scott. Any last words?
No, one thing I was thinking about on the drive home today that always strikes me is the people who are least hopeful about the future are the ones who don't interact with kids every day. And I think this is broadly true when people sort of slam younger generations for being disconnected or like perpetually online. And I know there are all sorts of statistics that say this, but like if you work with young people every day, most of us are pretty hopeful about the future because we work with kids who are great and who want the world to be better and are excited to kind of move forward and take what's next and have a lot of energy about it too. Teaching is a profession of hope. And so I come away feeling pretty hopeful every day, which is a good place to be in, I think.
I'm still thinking about Scott's distinction at the very end of our conversation that for him, AI isn't about saving time, it's about shifting time. For those of you leading districts or organizations, it's so tempting to view these tools purely as a mechanism to cut hours or streamline operations. But Scott challenges us to ask a harder question. If we free up that capacity, are we reinvesting it into relationships, student agency, and higher order thinking? The goal isn't a faster system, it's a more present educator. If your organization is trying to navigate these tensions and wants to move beyond simple efficiency, I invite you to visit our website at kinwise.org to explore our AI services. If you enjoyed this show, the best way to support us is to subscribe, share with a friend, or leave a quick review. You can also learn more at kinwise.org. Until next time, stay grounded, stay curious, and stay Kinwise.